Hi everyone, welcome to School of Scarlet. I am so happy to have you here today. Today we're going to be talking about death. Specifically, what is death? You may have always thought death was a real thing. I'm going to show you a different side, a different perspective of death here. My perspective. So I'm going to be sharing my stories around death and my realizations around death. So stick with me to the very end where I show you how death is not real. So many of us are terrified of death, just like I was. I was terrified of death. I was the one that anytime I was faced with death or being sick or some sort of illness or anything like that, I was terrified. I was terrified of this because if we really look at things, we're terrified of death because we love ourselves so much. It's actually just love. The fear of death is love. So we're so scared to not exist here anymore. We want to preserve and keep this expression here for however long we want it to be here. So death is very scary to the human, to the ego, to that side of us that's very identified. But you see, there's another side to us that's absolute, that's constant, that's whole and complete, and it never changes, never ceases to exist, can't be destroyed. And that side of us, when we're not tuned into it, is not very present, or we're not very tuned into it. We don't connect with that side. So the only thing that we see is that we're going to cease to exist. We don't see the side of us that's infinite, that will never ever die, that can never ever be destroyed, because there is nothing in existence to destroy it. It's not possible. So because we don't see clearly, we have this extreme fear of death. We have the extreme fear of ceasing to exist. But this fear is very silly. It's not real. And we are actually always dying. We're always going through life and birth and death cycles throughout our life. Throughout everything. Everything is showing us this. And it's completely natural to die. And I don't know if you'd be shocked to find out that I have died. And I haven't just died once. I've died several times. So I'm going to share with you here those stories of death. And I'm going to share with you where those stories and where those situations have led me. Now, please remember, death is just actually a story. We're just talking about a story here. So stick with me with that. Also, death is not what you think it is. We're not talking about the physical body or physical deaths here. If you have the understanding that you are not this physical body, that when this body ceases to exist, you don't cease to exist, you continue on. If you have that understanding, then you are 99% there, because you realize you are not this body. See, when we think that we were this body, we think that there's something we have to preserve, something we have to protect, that if we do something to this body, harm this body, that's it. But that's not how it really works. And that's not what we're going to be talking about here. We're going to be talking about the spiritual side of death and what really death is at its really root. What is it really? You're going to be surprised to find out death is not the end of anything. So I want to start by talking about where death began for me. I didn't think I had that much of a history with death because I don't feel I've had that many people die in my history as this expression. But come to find out, I've had a pretty healthy dose of it, enough to gain some understanding and to share with you for you to gain some clarity of your own. So for me, it started around the age of 3. My first experience with death was when my grandparents passed away. They were on their way to come visit me, and they passed away in a car accident. They both passed away pretty instantly. Now, you see, this was a big thing for me, and this was a big experience and something that really shifted and I think changed this expression, because prior to this, the level of love that these beings, my grandparents, provided and nourished me with was unconditional. And it was some of the purest love I've ever felt. So I've had a twin flame experience, if you're not aware of that. And if in that experience, I felt love. And that love that I felt in my twin flame experience was about equal to the love that I felt as a grandchild of these two beings. So I felt very, very loved, unconditionally loved. I felt it inwardly, and I felt it in my outward experience. When they passed away, I don't remember a lot. I don't have a lot of memories about that time. All I can do is remember an energetic feeling. And the feeling of it was that everything had switched. That where it was unconditional love, now it had become a void. It had become nil. It had become empty. It had become nothingness. And it didn't feel alive anymore. It felt that everything had lost color. The people around me were not the same. The experiences I was having were not the same. They were dimmed. And I had no feeling of nourishment. So this was the feeling that I had. And so my first experience of death, you could say, was pretty traumatic. Even though if we really look at it, it was just a 3-year-old had lost her grandparents. So for the outside world, we have to look at this. We look at things and we think they're just nothing. But really, they're creating a shift, a catalyst. They're creating an involution into something, going deeper and darker into something. It's basically digging that seed into darkness. Now it's going into darkness. Maybe for the first 3 years of this being's life, she felt unconditionally loved. She felt very free, very loved, very, very safe, very cared. But now it was time for a switch. So the universe switches that. This event occurs. What happens for the beings that are left here, for this being here, was a bit of invocation, going inward to darkness. Equating it to like a seed. We've buried the seed. So what does that feel like for the outside reality? For the outside reality, it felt kind of dim, like I say. It didn't feel very lively. Things had changed. So my next experience of death came a little bit later when my other grandparents passed away on my mother's side. And I experienced the same sort of energy. Although this time I hadn't lost something as great as unconditional love because I was no longer in that energy. I was feeling that, again, things were getting dimmer. Things were getting darker. Things were feeling unsafe. So that whole thing of death was not something very positive for this being. She was starting to see the connection and have the programming that death is something bad, something to be feared, something that changes people, something that causes harm, something that causes trouble. So now this being adopts this energy or idea around death. Okay, so those were her 2 experiences so far. The third experience of death that this character had was coming very close to death. When I was around 16 or 17, I was involved in my first automobile accident. I was driving my friend and I home, and we were going down some street. I was making a left turn, and it was a left turn green, yield on green. And I wasn't very familiar yet with driving and these rules. So I saw green, I thought go. So I went. I didn't yield to the oncoming traffic, and boom, I hit another vehicle. And I hit that vehicle pretty head on because I was going as if it was go, as if it was green. My car was totaled, the airbags ejected, and my friend was screaming, I was screaming, windshield glass, everything was shattered. I heard ringing in my ears. I was scared to death. I didn't know what had happened. I was so scared. And so I came really close to death that day. or so I thought. I don't know in reality how close that really was. Now looking back, it probably wasn't as bad, but my feeling was that I came really close to death. And that is when I realized that I really had to preserve and take care of this vehicle, of this body. And this is where a bit of neurosis developed for me because of my extreme fear of losing the existence of this body. I developed panic attacks. I would have one panic attack after another, anxiety that would arise. I could no longer drive. And the following year, I was supposed to be going to university, and I was opting to stay at a university that was in not too far away, maybe 45 minutes away from my home, but I had to drive there to go to college and do the things I wanted to do. I had to overcome this. And I was scared to death to drive because I equated driving to dying now. And every time I would get in the car, every time I would think about it, I would have anxiety, I would have panic. And if I hadn't had the support of my family that pushed me to driving, I would have probably never overcame that fear and became an agoraphobic. I probably would have had panic disorder. I probably been very fear-ridden person. And that's how those things develop. So I also have a counseling background, so I'd like to throw this in here. Inner work is not for nothing. When you have fears such as those, because they develop out of what's happening, things like exposure therapy within counseling, within therapy, are very useful. That's exactly what my family did, is push me to expose me to driving until I was comfortable enough to drive to school. And so I was able to successfully go to university. But that was a very terrifying time for me, and my fear of death really solidified in lots of different ways there. So now, my other experience of death was when I got married. So when I got married, we were going on a road trip to see his family. They lived quite far away in the northern part of the United States. So we took a road trip, and as we were going there, we hit a big, hefty deer that flew out in front of us out of nowhere. Our car hit it again, windshield shattered, airbag. This time the windshield got on me on my shoes and things, and so I was bleeding, and I didn't know where the blood was coming from or what was happening. My ears were ringing, and I was not right. I was out of the car now, and I noticed what had happened. We had hit the deer, saw what it was, but I wasn't in this reality. I couldn't hear, and I was feeling like, is this real or not real? That feeling. Did I die or am I alive? And that may have come from that extreme fear of death. So then very quickly, a tow truck arrives. And so we get in the tow truck, and as we get in the tow truck, everybody's quiet because for some reason I was in shock. I wasn't talking. So we're turning the corner of the road. All of a sudden, all I see is a clear blue sky with nothing there other than this huge white cross with rays emanating from it everywhere. And I'm like, what is this? And I'm looking at it, and I turn to my husband and I say in the most serious voice, did we die? And I don't remember what he said, if he laughed or said no or whatever. And I looked at that cross, and I could have sworn that I was at the footsteps of entering heaven. And so when I saw that cross, I couldn't believe it. So the tow truck driver took the car to the mechanic shop. We were dropped off at a restaurant that was right near a little hotel we were going to stay at to wait till somebody could help us. We were sitting there, and I explained to him, I honestly believed when we got hit, or we hit the deer, that I had died. I couldn't tell if I was alive or dead. And when we turned that corner, I explained to him, when I saw that huge cross, I said, I had nothing else to think other than I am in heaven now, and I have died. And he said, that's funny. He's like, it's just a weird coincidence. He said, as a matter of fact, he pulled a brochure out. We were at a little rest stop diner, and he pulled a little brochure there, and he showed it to me. It was the world's largest cross, and I believe it was in Effingham, Indiana. At the time, that was the world's largest cross, or maybe the United States' largest cross. But what a strange coincidence, right? For, again, to be faced with fear of death, and then this time the biggest cross is there. So, you can't make these things up. And so I'm sharing these stories because many of you probably can relate or have had out of this world experiences like this that are just really strange. So that experience was unusual, but again, it was just an experience bringing me closer to my feelings around death. So the next thing I had around death was I had trouble in my marriage conceiving. I wasn't able to get pregnant. We were going to fertility doctors, looking into all this and all that. We were charting, doing everything we could, taking supplements, vitamins, everything we could to become pregnant. But we were not able to become pregnant very easily. And every time we did, unfortunately, every time we became pregnant, we would lose the pregnancy. So in total, in the time that we were together, we had 3 miscarriages. And all 3 of those were very traumatic. You see, if you have ever been on a fertility journey, ever trying to conceive, it's one of the most painful journeys you can be on. You have no clue how it feels to want this for yourself, and your body is not cooperating. So my experience with death there was interesting. I realized that there was a disconnect there, that for whatever reason, I could not bring forth this life through this vessel, through this body. I realized that there was something wrong with this body. There was something about this body that is limited, cannot do this, cannot bring this forth. And it was very frustrating. And it creates self-hatred. It creates insecurity. It creates problems within a relationship. It's another realm of hell. So this whole experience was very hard on all involved, but more specifically on myself, because I was experiencing it through my body, through my mind. And also I kept this quiet. Many people, many women, if not all women, that have had miscarriages, most of the times don't share these things. They'll have a miscarriage and the same day they'll return to work, or they'll just take one day off or something like that. But this is a lot on your body physically, and your emotional body, and your mental body. It's a lot. So this whole society that we live in, and the programming that this character was in, did not have the nourishment or the support or the rest or the comfort to recover from these events of miscarriage and death and the body and all of these things. So that, again, was something traumatic. But now you see there's a progression in consciousness where there used to be a complete fear of death. Death is now starting to loosen up a little bit. And it's starting to be seen here with these miscarriages that, hey, this body, this vessel here is not actually, I'm not actually in control of this thing. So we don't feel free will. We start to realize we don't have complete free will at some point, and we realize that we're programmed and all of these things. It's only later on that we can turn this around and be that creator consciousness and get into the free will. We don't ever really have true free will till we recognize our divinity. Okay. So anyhow, when that was starting to be recognized, things were loosening. The character, the self, was being hated on so much now because it couldn't have this baby. The body was being hated on so much by the ego and itself and everything that it was no longer important. So the self was loosening. Okay. So that was my experiences of death up until that point. Now, here comes the real things that are going to really shape things for me as far as death. I still had some fear of death. Later on, I conceived my daughter, everything like that. But shortly after I conceived my daughter, in the hospital, I had extremely high blood pressure, and I was kept in the hospital another week. And so there began my battle with blood pressure. Now I was scared that my blood pressure was going to lead to a stroke, was going to lead to death, that I wasn't going to be able to see my daughter grow up. All of these fears now arose from this new medical condition that was discovered during my delivery of my daughter. So now I had this new level of fear that I was now living with, and I lived with that fear, constantly taking my blood pressure. If the numbers weren't right, I would shoot up in extreme anxiety. My anxiety would sometimes lead to anger, and I would lash out. I would become nervous. I would want to shut myself away. I wouldn't want to participate in activities that appeared stressful to me because I thought that those would raise my blood pressure. In certain ways, I was fearful of ever trying to conceive again because of all of this. There was many elements that arose from that medical condition. Well, a self-fulfilling prophecy and attracting and manifesting this to myself through believing my thoughts. 3 years later, I was in the hospital because my blood pressure was at stroke level and they could not bring it down when I was at a routine doctor's appointment. And so I was in and out of hospitals. I think I went 3 times and the ambulance once. And again, in this journey, I kind of kept it to myself. I just was really becoming very small. So when I'm talking about involution, we become very small and tiny and go inward, and we shut everybody out. And it's very painful. So for that reason, I didn't let anybody know. I eventually told my mom, and she was upset that I hadn't told people. And this is a stage where this is what you do. You shut everybody out. You shun them. You snap at them. You're not well. This is hell. Okay. So in this period, I was faced with death. I really literally thought I was dying. No one could find out what was wrong. I went to doctor after doctor. They put me on different medications. They did ultrasounds of the heart, the liver, the kidney, everything they could do. No one could figure out. So I was just diagnosed with either it was genetic or uncontrolled blood pressure. They couldn't control it. So my life was very scary. Some days my blood pressure would be extremely high. One day it was extremely high, but I refused to go to the hospital because I had just gotten out of the hospital and I didn't want to go back. So I went into my bedroom and I lay there. I could feel myself fading away. I could feel the energy fading. And in that moment, I died. I had a near-death experience. So I went into the light, towards the light, going back into that singularity. And as I did, I was fearful. I was still feeling like myself. And I've made a video about it if you'd like to watch. I don't know how much I want to go into it because it could be kind of a long video. But anyhow, I went into that and I realized that I wasn't going to be judged. I did see my life review. It was beautiful, and it was only pointing out the things that were beautiful in my life, the things that were love. And I was immersed in love, and I was awakened to love. And after that day, my diet changed, my blood pressure issue went away, my sleep issue went away, every issue I had went away, and my marriage ended. So basically, it was an awakening. It was basically a period of awakening and shedding. And so I had that period, and I was awakened to love. So that's where my whole mentality of death changed. I was no longer scared of death. I realized what it was, and it was beautiful, and it's nothing scary at all. And I know the things that I had done in my past. I know the so-called sins that I had done, the ones that I knew and thought that no one would forgive me, and for sure I was going to hell for. But I can tell you, in that life review was nothing but love. love and understanding for every moment. And it was a total reverence for oneself of, look at what you did. You were so amazing here. And so that's what it is. Even if you've done the most horrible things, your life review is not going to show you that. It'll show you how you did the best you could. Even with those things, look at what you did. So it's beautiful. It was not what I thought it was. So my whole outlook changed. And it gave me a strength within myself that I hadn't had before. I was able to easily leave my marriage and start new. I didn't have any hang-ups, any emotional problems behind that. I was able to continue on, but I was now in this kind of like go-getter mentality. And this is where my masculine energy kicked in. But anyhow, this was a very beautiful thing that happened, that I died in that moment. And so in my near-death experience, as I said, I was going towards the light. And there was a time there in the life review when we were going through everything that I could hear my daughter playing in the other room. And I said, I don't want to go yet. I want to see the rest of, my daughter's life. I want to. And as I was having those thoughts, as I was having those feelings, I was getting pulled back away from the light until I was back in my body, back in my bed. And that's when I realized that the body is not us. This is a vehicle we're using while we're here. Okay? And that's all it is. But it's not us. We're always transitioning. We're everywhere. We're everything and nothing all at once. So where you have this loosening that, hey, you are really not this body, your perception of things really begins to change. Now, my perception wasn't a non-dual perception at that time. I still believed in God, but I believed in heaven. I believed in a good God, and I believed that I was going to heaven, and I was not scared of death. I saw it as a celebration. So my view of death changed, but I still believed that there was something outside of me that, essentially would decide. But I felt pretty good about it, having already had that experience. Okay, so then what was my other experience of death? Well, this will be the ultimate one. So on my journey, what happened for me is that spontaneously a twin flame came into my life at one point, and I had a very quick, profound, deep relationship with this person that awakened a lot of parts of me. And then suddenly he was gone out of my life. Not just gone from me seeing him. He had passed away. He had died. And you see, this person was someone that, like I said, had the level of love, of unconditional love, like my grandmother. And it's an immense amount of love. And to lose something, because what death is, what we perceive it, is loss. To lose something like that, it was like you just punched me out of this world. And not in a good way. So that took a lot. I cried a lot. I went through a lot. I didn't want to be here. Heaven to me was being with him. See, the twin flame journey mirrors the awakening process. And being with your twin flame mirrors being in heaven. So for me, being with my twin flame was being in heaven. So not having that, or that possibility ever, there was no purpose to my existence any longer. So that's the kind of mentality that this extreme amount of energy polarity from one side of another does to a person. So anyhow, that was my experience of death. That, whoa, like you could totally lose it. Lose it mean like lose your mind, lose, your will, lose everything. You could lose it in losing a person, and how scary that was. And losing control sometimes can be one of the scariest places to be, but one of the best places to be, because when you surrender, when you truly lose that side of yourself and surrender, all that's left is God. And that's why when you're in these states, you pretty much plead out to God, because your ego knows that's all there is. And if you're going to survive in any way, that will be the only way. So this is where the ego dies. This is where the ego dies. And that is where I lost myself. When you lose yourself, you're no longer living for this person. You're living for that part of you that is God. Whatever that wants to do, whatever that wants to be expressed, whatever it wants to do today is what I'm doing. Your body now becomes a faithful servant to that God side of you. And this body is no longer trying to make friends to do this or that or whatever. It's doing whatever that God side of it wants to do. And it trusts in that 100%. There is no self anymore jumping in saying, hey, I'd rather do this. I'd rather do that. Every so often, there's this energy, this programming that come up. But it's truly seen it's not real. It's truly seen it's not there. So that part of us will fall away. For me, the void went deeper. In my despair, in my feelings of having lost everything, I lost myself. And in that moment, wish fulfilled, I lost everything. There was no sounding board. There was no sound. There was no other. There was no experience. There was nothing. I was fading. There was a feeling of losing and having lost everything, and a feeling of that there was never anything, and a feeling of relief about it. And so it's seen that all of this is not real at all. And if you so choose, because there is still a little bit of survival state in you, to go back and be part of this world, then you will go back and be part of this world like I am. But most likely, you're not going to be living for the self. You're now going to switch your whole life around. Your whole life's going to be whatever it is that's needing to be expressed here. And you are now just a faithful servant to that God side of yourself. And that God side of yourself is you. And you have now walked into your full, complete free will. Before, see, you weren't working with your free will. See, before you were tormented by this fear, this thing, that thing. They're doing this. The world did that. They can't do this for me. I have to get this. There's no way. I can't do it. You were blaming everybody. You were making excuses to why you couldn't do something. Because you literally felt you couldn't do it. You literally didn't have free will. You had glimpses of free will, but you had no idea how to use your free will. You didn't understand what free will was. You didn't understand who you were. So when you understand who you are, you have free will. And that is the creator consciousness, okay? That is where you are now working with all energies, all pieces. You see how energies work with each other. You essentially become an alchemist of this world. You see the polarity in everything. You can make connections. You have an understanding of the deep, intricate nature of this world. You have a spiritual understanding, understanding that is not seen. We have all this physical, yes, we could pick up a book and read it and do this and that, but you don't just have the understanding of the physical. You have the deeper understanding of how the physical comes to be. So all of this is only seen when you die. And I don't mean a physical death here. I don't mean a physical death. I'm talking about a death where you allow that part of you, that self, that ego, that egotistical side of you that wants to hang on, that wants to keep on. When you let go of that and you say, get out of here. I don't want anything. I'm done with that. When you're done with that, then you'll experience the kingdom. Then you will experience Christ consciousness. Then you will experience heaven, because heaven is right here and now. There is a verse somewhere in the Bible that talks about that a rich man that goes through the hole of a needle will never experience heaven or have that full experience. And why is that? It's not that he's rich or that he has money. It would be more that he had attachments. If you are very attached to those things of this world, if you have built yourself wealth on this world, or you've built yourself whatever it happens to be, make sure you're not too attached to any of these things, because attachment truly is the thing that keeps you being that self. So you identify with those accomplishments. See, you identify with that degree on the wall. See, you identify with having that house. You identify with having that wife. You identify with that car. You think those things bring value to you. You think those things are you. You're missing out on the kingdom of God. You're missing out on your throne. You have a throne that you're not sitting on. It's right here in your heart, and it is your true self. And if you only knew the secret, the funny secret, that if you were just your true self, you would unlock all the treasures of this world. You'd say I was delusional, and many people do say I'm delusional. Many people will say that, and many people have said that about people that have shared this message. But the only thing I can say to that is try it for yourself. This is a direct experience. This is not something that I'm just talking about that may or may not happen. This is something that is going to happen to each and every one of you at some point. Whether that is literally when you pass on, or whether that is before that. But death has been basically wearing this costume, that it's the scary, terrifying thing. So we constantly get away from it. And isn't it such intelligent design that right past that fear of death, right past that fear of death, is the kingdom. And you don't have to physically die for that. You can literally have it right here in this moment. And so that is the good news if you haven't heard. So if you're not sure what I'm talking about, but you feel a resonance, you want to know, you want to connect with your sacred heart, you want to dispel these fears, you want to get savage with life and go into your free will and stop being a victim in this life, then I recommend you contact me. Email me at schoolofscarlet@gmail.com, or simply purchase a one-on-one session or enroll in one of my courses. And through this, we can partner together and guide each other through this journey that is beautiful. We just have to get past some of these things we are so fearful of. And one of those things happens to be death for a lot of people, but there are many things that people are fearful of. So whatever that is for you, it's time to break through it. Go through it so that you can experience the true kingdom, so that you can sit on your throne and you can experience the truth of unconditional love. I love you all. Thank you so much for watching. Please share this video, like and comment down below so we can get more people watching this. Thank you again so much for watching.